Good morning. We're going to learn Tractate Shabbos 47a, the third chapter, Perek Shlishi. We're actually going to complete this chapter today. The name of the chapter is Kira. So we'll start from the top, Amar Bizeir, Amar Biasi, the second row. So we spoke about the concept of base for muktzah, base to muktzah, like the tray that you're putting the candlesticks on is a base for something that is muktzah. The Gemara cites a related discussion. Amar b'zeir, Amar b'yaseh, Amar b'yochanan, Amar b'chanin, Amar b'rumnus. Lo li hitir Rabbi letaltel machto b'efrosa. Rabbi permitted me to move a censer along with its leftover ashes. A censer is a vessel used for burning incense. Since it is a utensil that is used primarily for prohibited function, it may be moved only if it is needed for a permitted act, or if its location is needed for another object. So, Amar Rabbi Menashe, mi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, did Rabbi Yochanan really say so? Vatna noitel odom b'noi v'even b'yodoi. A person may pick his son, and his son has a stone in his hand, or a basket, when there is a stone inside the basket. We are dealing specifically with a basket that is filled with fruit, and thus it's not considered a base to the muktzah stone, because it also has peiros, it has fruits in there. But if there was no fruits in the basket, you wouldn't be able to carry it. So he was confused. Ravash's reaction was a little bit delayed. He was confounded for a moment. Here too, we are dealing with a case where the censer contained, this vessel used for burning incense, contained leftover granules of unburnt incense, and it is considered a base to muktzah. Granules of any significance in Rabbi's house? Certainly not. The censer should have been considered a base to muktzah, even if it contained some granules, because Rabbi was a wealthy man. So obviously there was no, the granules were of no importance to him. So he says maybe for the poor people that would come, they can benefit from this leftover granules. Clothing fit for poor people is classified as clothing for poor people, and is susceptible to tumah when it's in their possession. What happened if a wealthy man happened to have in his house a poor clothing that fits for poor people? Clothing fit for wealthy people is classified as clothing for wealthy people, and is susceptible to tumah when in their possession. Here's the answer. So, but clothing fit for poor people is not classified as clothing for wealthy people, and is not susceptible to tumah when in their possession. Because it's not for them, it's not a kli, it's not a beged, it's not considered a garment. It follows that a censer, this vessel used for burning incense. So we find that it follows that a censer containing leftover granules, leftover incense, that are fit only for poor people is muktzah when in the possession of a wealthy person? We just said that if it's in the possession of a poor person's garment, poor people's garments in the possession of the wealthy man is not considered muktzah. For him, it's not a beged. So how come these granules in the house of Rebbe, which are obviously of no significance to him, were considered muktzah? So, having rejected Ravash's reasoning, Abaye offers his own explanation of why Rebbe permitted Rabbi Rumnus to move the censer, even though it contains muktzah. Elamar Abaye midid ave agraf shari, because a censer filled with ashes is analogous to a vessel used for excrement, and it is permitted to remove such a vessel from one's house due to the discomfort it engenders. It brings out. So that was a special permission for something that is really repulsive. Abai's explanation too is rejected. There are actually two answers to this. First of all, you can't compare it to a vessel used for excrement because that's repugnant. And when it comes to incense, it's not repugnant. A vessel used for excrement is open, whereas the censer is covered. This vessel used for burning incense is not covered.
It's covered.
Is covered, yeah. So thus there's no basis for extending to a censer the dispensation granted for removing vessel used for excrement from one's house. When we were students at the house of Nachman, have a metaltalin or metaltalin on kinunu agav kitmo. We would move a brazier because of our need for its non-muktzeh ashes. Excuse me. Even when there were broken pieces of wood on it which were muktzeh. When Rabbi permitted Rabbi Rumnus to move a censer filled with ashes, it was in a similar situation where the ashes were not muktzeh, because their use had been anticipated before Shabbos, so therefore they're not muktzeh. And Rabbi's innovation was that it was permitted to move it for the use of the ashes, even though there were muktzeh pieces of wood on it. So, Meisiv, they challenged this on the basis of the following baita, which focuses on the dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon concerning the status of used lamp. Veshovin comes to the status of used lamp. Veshovin, but they, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, agree that if this lamp contains remnants of a wick, also a tatal, it's forbidden to move the lamp because it is a base to the muktzeh remnants in it. The Baisa considers the lamp a base to muktzeh, even though it also contains oil, which is presumably more valuable than the wick remnants. Amar Rabbi Begalil Shanu, they taught this a Baisa in the Galilee, where flax for the manufacture of wicks was scarce. Scarce. It was something that was not common. It was hard to get. The Galileans therefore valued the wick remnants no less than the leftover oil. So, having concluded its discussion of muktzeh, the Gemara returns to a topic it touched upon earlier, that of resembling utensils on the Shabbos. Levi bar Shmuel ashkichim Rabbi Abba Ravuna bar Chia the Abu Kaim apitcha devei Rav Huna, as they were standing at Rav Huna's doorstep. What is the law concerning reassembling a coppersmith bed on the Shabbos? A weaver's bed. Both translation are offered by Rashi. Okay, so are you allowed to put it back to assemble it on Shabbos? Reassembling a coppersmith bed on the Shabbos Amulei, Shapir Dam, it is permitted. Also, like coming to Rabbi Yehuda, Levi bar Shmuel later came before Rabbi Yehuda and told them this ruling. Omar, how Rav Shmuel Damitar Vayu, Rav and Shmuel both said, that one who reassembles a coppersmith bed on the Shabbos is liable to a chatos offering. One who reaffixes a branch of a candelabra on the Shabbos is liable to a chatos offering. Knes hayodin lo yachzir, for a plaster's pole, one should not reassemble it or add sections to it on the Shabbos. But if one did reassemble it, potur avaloso, he is exempt from liability, though he is forbidden by a rabbinical decree to do so. If one assembles a round horn, he is liable. Kerem Pshuta Potu, but if one assembles a straight horn, he is exempt from liability. Since the Brisa teaches that one is liable for reaffixing the branch of a candelabra, which is analogies in its degree of performance of permanence to the reassembly of a coppersmith bed, we learn that one who reassembles a coppersmith bed is liable. So how come they were told that it's permissible? The Gemara concedes that this Brisa cannot be reconciled with the view of Rabbi Abba and Ravuna, but nevertheless defends their ruling. Inu Domu Kaitano, they stated the ruling in accordance with the following Tana. The Tanya was concerning bed sockets, bed legs, and crossbow knots. One should not reattach them on the Shabbos. But if one did reattach them, potu, he is exempt from liability. But it's prohibited. Like he's exempt from liability, but it's still also velo iska. It's still forbidden by rabbinical decree. Velo iska v'im toka chayav chatos. And one should certainly not nail them in v'im toka chayav chatos. If one did nail them in, he is liable to a chatos offering. Rabbi Gamliel says, if the attachment was loosely fitting, it is permitted to attach it, provided one does not nail it in. Rabbi Abba and Ravuna Barchia, who permitted reassembling a coppersmith bed, were referring to one whose parts fit together loosely, and they followed the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Bei Rav Chama Abba Mitu Galilioto, in Rav Chama's home, there was a sectional bed, which they reassembled on Yom Tov. Certain rabbi said to Rava, "Mai daitich, what is your reason for permitting it?" Binyamin Atzadu, he said it's an indirect manner of assembly. Why is it indirect? So number 7, do you hold that since it is assembled loosely and without screws, this is not the usual method of completing a utensil, and no biblical prohibition is involved? I guess it's like the folding chairs. Maybe we can say it's like a folding chair or a folding table on Shabbos. You're allowed to put together. There's no screws involved in the assembly. So it's called binyamin atzad, indirect manner of assembly. Neidi surah deraisa leka. But this is not a sufficient reason to allow it, for although there is no biblical prohibition against such assembly, Isura derabon meika, but there's still a rabbinical prohibition against it, as the Tanna Kama stated in the Bais above. I concur. I follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who said in that Braita, if the attachment was loosely fitting, it is permitted. And it says that this is the final halacha in number 8. It says this is also the final halacha as recorded in Shulchan Aruch Chaim 3:13:6. However, Beis Yosef and the Ramah add the proviso based on the Milchomes Hashem that the sections of the utensils must actually be designed to fit together loosely. One may not reassemble a utensil that is designed to fit together tightly, even if he fits the parts together loosely. So even with that, there is proviso. So you have to know what you're allowed to do, what you're not.
And if it's worth doing it.
Right. So Mishnah, learn new Mishnah. Noisim lekli tachas haner lekabel nitzotzes. We may place a vessel under a lamp to catch the falling sparks. But one may not place water in the vessel because he thereby extinguishes the sparks. So you're allowed to put a kli, a vessel that contains the sparks, but don't put water in this vessel. That's the Mishnah. Now, the Gemara questions the Mishnah's permit to place a utensil under a lamp on the Shabbos to catch the falling sparks. But the moment you put the kli, you're not allowed to use it anymore. So you mevatel kli. On Shabbos, you're making this kli disqualified for use. You're nullifying the preparedness of the utensil. Up to this point, the utensil was ready to be used, But now it cannot be used anymore. So he said that sparks don't really have any substance in them, and therefore it should be permitted. And you should not put water in it because you are extinguishing the sparks. Why is it prohibited? Shall we say that we have learned here an anonymous Mishnah in accordance with the view of Rabbi Yossi, also, who said that indirectly causing a fire to be extinguished is forbidden on the Shabbos. Not everyone agrees with him, but this is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Tanakama of the Mishnah does not restrict this ruling. Rabbi Yossi, however, prohibits the use of new earthenware utensils that are filled with water, because the heat of the fire may burst these vessels, thereby releasing the water and quenching the fire. This fits into the category of gram kibui, that you're not indirectly causing a fire to be extinguished, rather than extinguishing it to direct effort. All agree that the causation, rather than direct performance of a melacha, is generally prohibited rabbinically. However, according to Tanakama, in the case of financial loss, such as the threat of spreading fire, the rabbis did not prohibit it. Rabbi Yossi, on the other hand, holds that the causation is prohibited even in cases involving financial loss. But do you really consider this explanation of our Mishnah reasonable? For I could say that when Rabbi Yossi said that one may not indirectly cause a fire to be extinguished by Shabbos, it was regarding doing so on the Shabbos itself. Be'erev Shabbos mi'omar, but did he say so on Erev Shabbos? V'chi tema achanami b'Shabbos. And if you'd say that perhaps here too the Mishnah means to forbid only on the Shabbos, v'atanya noisim kli dachas, and the Kabbalah says Shabbos, it says clearly you're allowed to put a vessel, allowed to place a vessel under a lamp to catch the falling sparks on Shabbos. And it goes without saying that we may do so before the Shabbos. One may not place water in the vessel because thereby extinguishes the fire. This is prohibited even before the Shabbos, and it goes without saying that it is prohibited on the Shabbos itself. Since the prohibition against filling the vessel with water applies even before the Shabbos, you cannot explain it by attributing it to Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara concedes the point and therefore advances a different explanation. You can even say that our Mishnah accords with the view of the rabbis who differ with Rabbi Yossi. Shaniacha, in this case here, is different than the case discussed by the rabbis and Rabbi Yossi in Pesha Mekorev es kibuyo, because here he readies the direct extinguishing of the sparks. Adon aloch kira, we shall return to you, kira. And with that, we completed chapter 3. Chapter 4 is called Bameh Toimen, with what may one insulate, and it's speaking about insulation, hatmana in Hebrew, hiding, insulating hot food, wrapping the pot with some material as a way of preserving its heat for the Shabbos. The laws of Atmana may be summed up in short rules as follows. Before the Shabbos, one may insulate with substances that maintain the food's heat, but not with substances that add heat to the food. On the Shabbos proper, one may not insulate with any substance. That's like, in short, these two rules were enacted for separate reasons. Insulating on the Shabbos proper was prohibited for fear that should one, on coming to insulate his pot, find the food to have cooled, he may forgetfully come to reheat it. Insulating before the Shabbos with materials that add heat was prohibited, lest one come to insulate the pot with ash mixed with live coals, which in turn may lead to his raking the coals on the Shabbos in order to hasten the cooking. Because many of the substances suited for installation or muktzeh. A significant portion of this chapter is also devoted to the laws of muktzeh. So, b'meh teimnin u'b'meh ein teimnin. It is forbidden to insulate pots before the Shabbos with substances that add heat to the food. The Mishnah enumerates those substances included in this prohibition. With what may one insulate hot food, and with what may one not insulate them? One who removes a pot from the stove on Friday and wishes to preserve its heat, what may he use to insulate the pot? Ein teimnim, loy begefes, loy bezefer, loy bemelach, loy besid, loy bechol. One may not insulate with mark, nor with manure, nor with salt, nor with lime, nor with sand, bein lachin, bein yeveshin, either wet or dry, loy beseven, loy bezogin, loy muchim, v'asom v'zon shen lachin, nor with straw, nor with grape skins, nor with flocking, nor with grasses when they are moist. Aval teimnim b'em kshen yeveshin, but one may insulate with them when they are dry. So the Gemara analyzes the Mishnah's first ruling. They inquired in listing mark among substances that add heat to the food. Does the Mishnah refers to olive mark, whose heat is relatively intense, but as for the mark of sesame, whose heat is less intense, it is fine to insulate food in it, or dilma, the shumshunin tanan v'chol sheken the zaysim. Perhaps does the Mishnah refer to even to the mark of sesame, and as for the mark of olives, it goes without saying that certainly one is forbidden to insulate with it. So the Gemara says, Tashma, the Omar Rabbi Zera Mishum Chad Devei Rabbi Yanai Kupa Shetoman Ba'osu Lanichu Al Gefesh Zaysim. A box in which one insulated hot food, it is forbidden to place it on top of olive mark. Shmamina Shel Zaytim Tenan. Since Rabbi Zera specifies olive mark, one can conclude from this that only olive mark adds heat, not sesame mark. Accordingly, the Mishnah refers to the mark of olives that is forbidden. The Gemara rejects the proof. In fact, I can tell you that in regard to actual insulation, the mark of sesame is also forbidden. However, in regard to Asuke avlo de zaysim, maske avlo de shumshumin. Asuke avlo de zaysim, maske havlo. Shumshumin loy maske havlo. Radiating heat upwards. Radiating heat upwards. The mark of olives radiates heat upwards, but the mark of sesame does not radiate heat upwards. That's the daf for today. We'll learn shortly Tractate Sota. We'll see you soon.